Support for today's episode comes from Amazon. Amazon is working toward a carbon-free energy future, doing more with less, investing where it matters most, and supporting communities where we operate. FERC's PJM governance overhaul. What executives should know. FERC's PJM governance overhaul threatens new delays for grid-dependent capital plans. The Federal Energy Regulatory Commission has concluded that the country's largest grid operator cannot govern itself fast enough to keep pace with demand, and the fix it convenes this month could reshape how long every large load project in a 13-state region waits for an answer. The Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, FERC, will hold a technical conference on July 23rd to rebuild how PJM Interconnection, the regional transmission organization serving 67 million people across 13 states and Washington, D.C., makes decisions about its own grid. For any executive with a project sitting in PJM's interconnection queue or a large load tariff already signed, that date now belongs on the capital planning calendar. A governance fix aimed at speeding up PJM's decisions could just as easily produce a longer stretch of procedural uncertainty before anything actually moves faster. FERC Chairman Laura Sweat set the conference in motion at PJM's annual meeting in Baltimore on May 12th, telling the grid operator to its face that it may have grown too big to function and that its governance structure is unacceptable. Sweat described PJM's stakeholder process, which requires buy-in across 5 membership sectors before major changes take effect, as slow where it must be fast, opaque where it must be transparent, and vulnerable to vetoes and agenda control, exactly when the region needs immediate action. FERC Commissioner David Lassert reinforced the point on July 9th at a WIRES meeting in Philadelphia, calling the status quo really untenable and saying PJM's process has continued to just grind into gridlock. Why FERC escalated from criticism to a formal conference. PJM's governance problem has been building for longer than the 2 months since Sweat's Baltimore remarks. The grid operator missed its own reliability target in its most recent capacity auction, which cleared at a record price, and has separately drawn criticism for timing decisions on its reliability backstop auction that state officials and even the Trump administration asked it to reconsider. Those operational failures are what turned governance from a background complaint into FERC's stated priority. Sweat described PJM as facing a serious legitimacy crisis in which confidence in its decision-making has completely eroded, a characterization PJM's own spokesperson has since avoided disputing directly, saying only that the organization appreciates FERC's interest and looks forward to participating. The 5-sector structure Sweat criticized was built to give transmission owners, generation owners, other suppliers, electric distributors, and end-use customers each a formal voice before PJM changes its rules. That balance was designed for a slower-moving grid. It was not designed for a region where data center load growth is outpacing PJM's own forecasts year over year, and where a stalled vote can leave a project's interconnection status unresolved for another full stakeholder cycle. What the July 23rd conference will and will not decide. FERC has been explicit that the conference will not rule on any pending docket. Instead, it will convene PJM's board, executive management, representatives from all 5 membership sectors, investors, PJM's independent market monitor, state regulators, the organization of PJM States Inc., and consumer advocates to build a public record aimed at actionable change, in Sweat's words, rather than another round of grievances. That framing matters for anyone trying to plan around the outcome. The conference itself will not produce new rules. It will produce a record that FERC uses to decide on its own timeline whether and how to order PJM to restructure its stakeholder process. That sequencing means the near-term effect on capital planning is uncertainty, not resolution. A project already navigating PJM's interconnection backlog, which Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory has tracked at more than 2,000 gigawatts of proposed capacity awaiting connection nationally, now has to factor in the possibility that the rules governing that queue could change mid-process. Executives should not assume a governance fix arrives on any particular timeline, and should not assume it resolves in favor of faster approvals rather than a longer transition period while new structures are negotiated. the overlap with existing cost and timeline pressure. PJM's governance troubles are landing on top of cost pressure that was already reshaping how companies evaluate the region. Manufacturers and data center developers in the PJM footprint are already competing directly for the same substation capacity, a dynamic that has pushed some industrial operators toward on-site generation just to control their own timelines. Large load customers signing new tariffs in the region are also taking on multi-year minimum terms and per megawatt collateral requirements that function more like project finance agreements than utility bills, a structure finance teams increasingly need to underwrite the way they would a long-term lease. A governance overhaul does not resolve either pressure on its own, but it does determine how quickly PJM can act on the reforms already under discussion to relieve them. The panelist list will say more than the conference itself. Watch the self-nomination process under FERC docket number 8026-7-00 before July 23rd arrives. Who gets a seat, and which of PJM's 5 sectors shows up willing to cede ground will say more about the odds of real reform than anything likely to be announced on the day itself. Sweat called this a work session to build a record-eyed toward actionable change, not a decision point, and FERC has already said it will not touch any pending docket during the proceeding. That leaves the actual rulemaking, if one comes, on a timeline nobody at FERC has committed to yet. Executives with capital tied to PJM's queue should read that as a caution against betting on speed. Sweat has been unusually direct for a sitting FERC chair, and Lacerte's comments 3 days ago suggest the Commission isn't backing off. But directness about the problem is not the same as clarity about the fix, and a governance overhaul that takes a year to negotiate could add as much uncertainty as the dysfunction it's meant to replace. Sustainability Soundbites. Energy coverage is sponsored by Amazon. Visit the link in our show notes to learn more about Amazon's spotlight on energy. For sponsorship opportunities with Environment and Energy Leader, please reach out to a member of our team.